Right off the bat, I'm only heating one pan. I'm doing 3 steaks. One of them is going to be well done. 2 of them are going to be medium rare. So one goes in first, so it has plenty of time to cook. My pans are well seasoned, but I still always put a little bit of oil on them before I start cooking, just to make sure. I'm going to heat this skillet up until the oil's smoking just a little bit, and then it gets started. 1 minute on each side. After 1 minute on each side, then it goes into the oven. This first steak is going to go in for 4 minutes, turn, and then 4 more minutes. The steak was coated heavily with kosher salt and then put into the refrigerator for about an hour. When it came out, any additional salt on the steaks, I took off. After the steaks were ready and my squash in the oven were ready, I put a little bit of pepper, and this time a little bit of Cajun seasoning. I used the Zatarain's. It's kind of a cheat, but it's a nice mix, and it makes the steaks taste good. This pan's almost ready, so I'm going to put a little bit of kosher salt in the bottom. That helps keep the steak off the bottom and from sticking. Just a little bit. It doesn't take much. Steak's already been salted once. It's had plenty of time to soak in. There's plenty of salt in the steak. You might notice that I'm using all cast iron. There's 2 reasons for this. 1, it heats extremely well. 3 reasons. It'll go in the oven, and it cleans really easy, especially if you've got your food prepared before you put it in. Alright, the pan's just starting to smoke. It's 1 minute on each side. Now ideally when you're cooking steak like this, you're going to want a hood or ventilation on your stove. I do not. So it's very likely that about 10 minutes from now, my smoke alarm is going to go off. But it's okay. I know where the mop is and I can shut it off quickly. And that's 1 minute. Now at the same time that I put this steak in, I'll be taking the squash out and letting them cool off a little bit. Another good reason to use cast iron, you can use any utensils you want in it. If I really wanted to, I could have gotten this much, much hotter and actually put a very heavy sear on it. I'd like to, but I don't have ventilation, as you can see from the smoke coming up. So, good hard sear on the steak is hard for me to do, unless the weather's nice and I can open the windows up. The air conditioner is doing a good job of keeping up. But if I open up the windows, it's going to go from 80 degrees in here to probably about 90. Actually, this first steak that's going to be well done, I'm going to put on the bottom rack so it doesn't heat up as fast. I don't want it shoe leather. It's bad enough I have to make it well done. Now I'm going to set that first steak on a 4-minute timer, flip it, and then 4 more minutes. Actually, maybe 5. I need it done. The other 2, they're going to be moving. You may have noticed these hot pads that I'm using. I actually got these at Maynard's, which is a home and lumber center we've got out here in western Kansas. I don't know where else it is in the United States. But I bought them because they looked really nice. They're heavy fabric mitts, and they have 2 pot holders as well. And they also have a silicone coating in kind of a diamond shape all over the gloves. As you can see, like any other hot pad or glove, it doesn't make it heat proof. But I've never burned myself wearing them. Occasionally I use them when I'm deep frying just so I don't splatter grease on my arms. Oh, look at that forehead. Gotta love the wide angle. So now the other 2 steaks are ready, and they're going to come out about medium rare. So I'm going to sear them both sides for 1 minute and in the oven for 2 minutes per side. And that should leave them plenty warm. I've done this many times, and more than 2 minutes, and they're just overcooked. Another light coat of salt in the pans. I might mention that the stove that I'm using I picked it out specifically. When we moved into this house, it didn't have a stove. It did have gas, which I really like. I really like a gas stove over an electric stove. In some respects, it's not as consistent, but it's a lot faster. I can get it hot quick, and I can shut it off and get it cool quick. Once these steaks are in the oven, I'll move the squash back over and set them underneath the vent on the stove so that they can stay warm. While my pans are heating up, I mentioned squash. I've got 1 large acorn squash and 1 large zucchini squash. I've cut the zucchini squash into 3 wedges and the acorn squash into 4 quarters. I put margarine on them, butter, and some salt and pepper, and that's all I usually do. If I cut the zucchini in half, sometimes I'll put cheese on the top too, but we happen to have some cheese dip ready in the fridge, so maybe we'll put that on top instead. Pans are starting to smoke. It's time to start the other 2 steaks. So that's 1 minute in the oven for the first steak, 1 minute seared. So when that 1 minute is up, it'll be 2 more minutes on the steak in the oven and 2 minutes for these steaks. If you do this right, the timing works out great. So that's 1 more minute on these steaks. Flip them over in the oven. There you go. Stove off. And I'll grab
showing you gonna blow your way yesterday last night.
So now that we're waiting the last 2 minutes for all 3 steaks to finish, I'm going to point out my squash. Now I told you what I did to them. I'll also tell you that I cooked them for a half an hour at 350 degrees before I started the steaks. Steaks were out and already warmed to room temperature. After the timer went off on the squash, I came in, I put my melted butter and seasoning on the steaks and started cooking them. At the same time, I had turned the temperature on the stove up to 500 degrees. So the squash got a little bit of hot time to brown them, and the oven was ready to go at temperature for the steaks once they were already done searing. All right, there's Dad. That's the well done one. Stove's off,
We're gonna wait.
oven's off. I'm ready to plate. I'm going to take the steak, flip it over in the juice a couple times. No reason to waste that juice. I don't have any potatoes today or rice. It's kind of a low carb situation here, so I don't get to make the gravy as often as I'd like.
Well, I figured you got a storm. The storm was going that way.
Alright, so here's a look at dinner. There we go. T-bone steaks and squash. Looks tasty to me. I very rarely turn down a steak. But now I'm going to go before my steak gets cold and my battery goes dead. So until next time, burn it good.